speakers. I too believe that AI will not replace humans and will only increase our efficiency and productivity. But to have a deeper discussions, we have on our panel today Mr. Shalabh Narain, who is a strategic pursuit leader, Asia Pacific Lenovo Global. Please welcome that. Please, sir, come on the dais, please. Mr. Shalabh Narain is a global IT thought leader and digital transformation advisor with over 20 years of experience in enterprise technology. With a background in engineering, an MBA, and a SAP certification, he combines technical expertise with strategic insight to drive innovation across industries. Beyond industry, he is passionate about education and mentorship, conducting SAP academies and guest lectures across Australia, India, Malaysia, and Singapore. He advocates for responsible AI, emphasizing ethical innovation and governance. So he's our moderator today.
Thank you.
I'll welcome Dr. Aditya Narvekar. He's a director, SP Jain School of Global Management. Welcome, Dr. Aditya. Dr. Narvekar is a seasoned product and AI leader with over 20 years of global experience across top-layer organizations, including JP Morgan USA, HSBC USA, and then the other Adaptive USA as a co-founder. He has conducted generative AI workshop for working professionals in Sydney, receiving strong engagement and feedback. So please welcome. And then we have Mr. Audrey Joshim. Mr. Audrey Joshim is a fellow of a Chartered Institute of Management Accountants, UK. So he has run his own training and coaching consultancy. He is the first non-UK or Irish person to hold this position. He was in the Council of CIMA for 12 years. So please welcome Mr. Audrey. Thank you so much. Now I'll hand over to you to go further. Thank you.
Thank you so much. First of all, namaste to my Indian audience, and a very good afternoon to my Australian counterparts and colleagues. In a typical Australian way, I would also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land where I stand, and I pay my respect to the elders past, present, and emerging. That's for my Indian colleagues, that's the way we start any Australian session, because we have to pay our respect to the original people over here. Now, we've been hearing about AI and governance. I believe this is a very interesting panel, and thank you, ICSI, for this opportunity and having this. There is two innovation that has happened in the panel constitution itself. If you ask yourself, where do innovations happen? There are only two places where innovations generally happen. First, it's where all of us come from. It's academia, universities, schools, colleges. That's the breeding ground of innovations. And that is represented here by Dr. Aditya, who has a doctorate in machine learning. He's been at the forefront of these discussions, and being him, so he's on one end of the spectrum on this panel. The second place, when the innovation comes up, and it's about any innovation, how do you govern it? How do you actually execute it? That's where the governance part comes up, and we've got Aubrey over here, who's got 20 years of experience in governance. The third is the bad boys like us, who the corporates were supposed to be doing the bad things. But it is these corporates who take that ground level innovations and make it mass market. There are two, again, the topic has one important feature is in AI and governance. I think these are the household names now. I can bet our kids, yours and mine, everybody's kids, are much more smarter in using AIs than we are. But then that's how the way the world is transforming itself. So I'll start this conversation, and given with having a little bit of introduction from each of these gentlemen about their professional life and what they've done. So Dr. Aditya, if you could help the audience understand about briefly introducing yourself and the work that you've done in this field.
Sure. Thanks, Shalabh. So a bit about me. Well, I started my career in many years ago now, 20 years ago, as essentially in algo trading space. So did that for a long time in New York City. Um, then decided to, me and some of my colleagues, we did a fintech startup. And then I guess I decided to spend some time in academia. So that's essentially my journey. Education-wise, I have a MS, I have a MBA, and a PhD from New York University. I guess I spent too much time in classroom, so decided to come back again as a teacher. Right. So right these days, primarily work in the AI space. I do a lot of research in the AI space, and I'm also involved with a fintech startup that where I'm one of the co-founders. So that's what I do on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you, Dr. Aditya. There's another change in this forum, by the way. We've just come out of the lunch outside, beautiful lunch. I wouldn't want to sit and sleep over here as a moderator, so I prefer standing. Please feel free if you're also. On the governance side, we've got Aubrey. Aubrey, if you could, illuminate a little bit about
Thank
the
you, Shalab. I'll take the pleasure of sitting down.
Please.
I always like to be different, Management accountants are different. I have always been in the corporate world. Not so much essentially in governance, but I'm a finance professional. I'm a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants of the UK. And my corporate experience goes back to having been on the board of CIMA for over 12 years, ending up as president of the institute, like I was introduced. Now, as accountants, we've always been concerned and had, views on how governance should be. So governance has been around for a long time. And in addition to having, done that, I was also a trainer for the Australian Institute of Company Directors for a little over a decade. Working on strategy and risk and finance and all those kind of areas. So governance has been front and center of what I had been involved in for a long time. Sometime in 2004 or 5, I first took an interest in big data and analytics, having attended a SaaS conference here. And ever since then, I have taken a fancy to this emerging space. What we talk of about AI today is significantly taking off over the last few years. And therefore, putting my thinking hat on, I have been wondering and thinking, okay, how should governance and everything we do around that evolve in the context of AI? So that's hopefully what we're going to talk about today and share with you. I must also say, Shalab, we were here from yesterday, you and I. A lot of what we were hoping to speak has been talked about before, right? So when you come at this stage, you always have the benefit of sort of, referring back to what was said by so-and-so or this group or that group. But we'll try to make a difference in the way we say, okay?
Thank you, Aubrey. And so 2 spectrums. I'm the 3rd spectrum, the bad guy on. Well, I wear 3 hats. My day job, I head the Asia Pacific for solution and services for Lenovo. I used to head HCL Technologies, ANZ division and Japan division. That's my day job where I get my salary from. I've got 2, you've heard word CSR, corporate social responsibility. I believe in PSR, personal social responsibility. I wear 2 hats on PSR. One, I am the president of technology chair of Australia-India Chamber of Commerce. So I promote businesses both way, mentor them, guide them in my personal capacity without any fees. My second PSR is I'm a mentor to many startups, university students and all, guiding them in their career. Now, that kind of completes the spectrum of AI. Now, before I venture into the topic, I'll start with 4 stories to be precise. One, which is very close to all of us. All of us apply for jobs, right? And without naming any company, last year, there was a large organization that used AI to sift through the job applications that was coming in. These large companies get humongous amount of job applications. Right investment, you would say, right? Nothing could go wrong over there. But look what happened. The model on which that AI was trained used all resumes that were male-dominated. And therefore, in the actual life, when the model was made to work, it started giving results and penalizing the fairer gender. So if you were a women's leader, if you were a women chess player, and you had put all that into your resume, the model would penalize you and take you out of the pre-selection. First example on the HR front, which means your application got unscreened at the first. You could be the valid candidate. The second example, this was on a lighter side. The second example, imagine if you could buy a 7-seater SUV for $1, and that's what happened. So an SUV of a top brand that was selling for hundreds and thousands of dollars, a customer could chat with the chatbot and helped it, agree to sell that new SUV for $1. Interesting, right? The third use case is about, and this you might have heard. We all want, when we go for personal holidays, we want all cool fares, right? Something which is we could get the best. There was a bereavement fare, again a large airlines company, where the customer was interacting with the chatbot agent, saying that I want a lower fare, referring to XYZ policy, and guess what? He agreed, he got a fare which was very cheap. And the company later on denied that, saying that, no, this was not my error, but this was the chatbot's error. And the guy went to the court, and the court said, it's false. What does all these three signify? These are real life cases, all happened just here. And I'll give you my personal use case. When I said in my mentoring capacity, I was mentoring someone, an Indian startup, that was planning to, that created a product for Australia. And when he brought that product to my attention, it had something called as softening the water. And I was like, why do you do that? He said, because the analysis, the research that they did using ChatGPT and other models, they found that the water here was hard. And I've been living in Australia for past 15 years. There's no hard water, at least in the cities. So imagine the amount, it's a startup, the amount of money he spent to create a system for Australia, which just went down the drains. If, using these examples, I will now ask my peers over here, what is the means of, what do we mean when we say governance in the AI world? Dr. Aditya, first.
Right, I'll go first. So, look, first of all, AI, as we know it, is a lot of people do not actually understand what AI itself is, right? Think about AI as something that is a mirror, yep? Meaning it's going to reflect what you show it. In the sense, the AI that we deal with is not truly artificial intelligence. In the sense, when you ask ChatGPT, I like pizza and it says pasta, right? It says pasta, why? Because of all the things it has been trained on, most people said pasta. As simple as that. Yeah. If you ask it what is 2 plus 2, it gives you 4. It's actually not doing the addition. All right. All it is doing is just predicting the next word. So it is, and I'm going to be a little bit pedagogical here. It's actually a probabilistic model. Yeah. So don't worry if you don't recall probability from high school, but probabilistic simply means that its responses are not deterministic. Yeah. Now, given that, and this is what we are calling AI right now. Now, do not get me wrong. I'm not saying that this technology is bad or is not going to work out or is going away anywhere, right? Sam Altman was recently asked whether we are in the middle of an AI bubble. And he said yes, but it's a bubble with a kernel of truth, right? Essentially, I think what he meant was, most of you guys, and I'm very happy to be here, that, in the classroom when I talk about the .com bubble, people generally don't relate to it. Now, in this room here, at least, I'm pretty sure there are enough people who have experienced the .com bubble, right? So the .com bubble happened in 1999, right? And out of the .com bubble, sure, there was a lot of equity that was burnt, but from that sort of, from that .com bubble, companies emerged that have essentially changed the world in the last 20 years, right? Google, if you think about Google, Facebook, all of these companies roughly came out at that time, right? So we could be in the middle of a bubble, but even if this bubble bursts at some point, the world is going to change. The world we live in today is 5 years from now is going to be very different from the world that we live in today. Yeah, that's a given in my opinion. Now, coming back to governance, governance, in my opinion, has three things. One is transparency, accountability, and explainability, right? Transparency meaning how is the AI trained? Where has it learned what it has learned from? Yep. There are tons and tons of models out there now, and there is no sort of regulation that requires model makers to sort of provide that kind of transparency. That's first, right? Accountability. Well, accountability is like playing musical chairs, right? Or a hot potato that everybody just keeps passing around. Again, without taking any names, the driverless, the autonomous driving systems, right? Well, if you get into an autonomous driving system, put it in fully autonomous mode, and if it causes a crash, guess who's liable? The driver, the owner. Yeah, it's not the developer who actually built that autonomous system. It's not the company. It's the owner. Yeah. So what that essentially means is there is no accountability right now. I mean, these things still have to be determined. It's still a finger in the air, so to speak. And the last part is explainability, right? We have AI that can, and we ChatGPT or large language models are sort of what I call as glamorous AI. There is kind of predictive AI which can do excellent jobs at predicting say a credit risk for a project or for a person, right? Which has lots of industry applications. But can we explain to someone why their loan is declined or why their application for a job is declined? Well, we partially can, and it's an active area of research, but not to the scale at which I think AI can be mass adopted in governance, right? So,
Thank you, Dr. Navika. Very beautifully explained. Audrey, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, so let me take it from one of the things you said, and to get the correctness out of the way. You were referring to hard water and the outcome that you were providing your startup with. Actually, Sydney has hard water. Having worked in Sydney Water, I know what's behind it. They use chemicals to alter the pH factor of the water. If they didn't do that, you'd have hard water. And in most places outside of the Sydney Water Basin, you will have hard water. So in a way, that was right. The information that he had was right. It had to be explained in the context of how it was to be used, i.e. in a demographic that was having its water treated to alter the pH of the water, right? So similarly to me, governance or AI in the context of governance is the same thing. So to me, it is doing the right thing in the right context, okay? Now, for those of you who have been following the news yesterday, you would have heard two major, legal cases went to court yesterday, right? One of them was the antitrust case against Google, which Google won to some extent and lost something else, right? The US courts were trying to break up the company to take away Chrome from Google, but they held on to that. However, they were penalized and prohibited from having certain collaborations with other parties to only provide their search engine. So that they lost. That was number one. Another more interesting and significant one, which really shocked me as well, and that was quite recently, a teenager committed suicide in the US. And the teenager had used ChatGPT to come up with the best way to kill himself. And he did so. And the parents took the company to court, or is in the process of taking the company to court. What ChatGPT has done is it has now introduced parental controls into ChatGPT, where the parent's ChatGPT can be linked to the child's ChatGPT, I suppose, based on an age criteria or something like that, in order that you monitor what the child is doing. Now, for example, you already know, for those of you who are in Australia, it's going to come in pretty soon, I think early next year. There's restrictions to the use of certain apps based on age. So anyone below 16 cannot use certain apps, okay? So to me, that is that's good governance in the sense of AI being used in the correct context to do the right thing at the right time. Now, as an accountant, we have always been concerned with the accuracy of information and data that we provide. We capture in organizations and provide. And therefore, if we are going to use AI in order to replace accountants or whatever, we have to ensure that there are adequate guardrails in place to make sure that things are done in the right manner. So while AI is very powerful, it has also to be controlled and managed, right? Now again, talking about your example about the job applications, these are two of the very significant concerns that I have with the way AI is going. And these are the important things that we should consider from a corporate governance standpoint. And that is bias and ethical guidelines. Now the bias, I mean, you referred to job applicants being segregated on, gender, whatever. I mean, one of the major banks, whom I shall not, global bank, whom I shall not mention, was taken to court because their algorithms favored males over females in granting loans. Yeah, right? And that happens. Similarly, doctors who used AI had a preference for treating whites over blacks. And there are several instances like that. So AI is very smart, but if AI does the wrong thing in the wrong context, then it's a failure of aspects of governance to me.
Thank you, Aubrey. I like the way you put different things into perspective with the examples. By the way, that also gives me, are you open for free consultation as well? Maybe we can form a team on that. Okay, now coming back to you both what you just said, given that you emphasize the need of governance, then what, according to you, is the most pressing issue or challenges when it comes to governance of AI programs?
Okay, shall I go with this?
Yeah, please.
I thought you were trying to keep the audience in the dark. No, okay, not so. Right, to me, I mean, I see not one elephant, but maybe two elephants in the room. And to be precise, in the boardroom, especially in the context of AI, right? The knowledge and competencies of current boards in this whole new space of AI is extremely limited. Now, I said I was fairly involved with the Australian Institute of Company Directors. The average age of directors on Australian boards is about 62 years. In fact, 62.8 years for males and 59 point something for females. And females are much less than males. The oldest director is 85 years. The youngest director is 30 years. Now, that tells you something, right? The next thing is, rightly or wrongly, I'm an accountant, all right, but it has been found that nearly 40% of the boards of Australian boards consist of finance professionals, followed by legal professionals, and then tailing down to technocrats and scientists and all that kind of stuff. Now, in this emerging era of AI, how do you think the demographic of boards should change? So there lies that first elephant in the room. They don't even, we were talking so much about risk and opportunities and all of that. The fundamental thing in risk is asking the right questions. I think someone mentioned that thing that we always tell directors. There is no such thing as a wrong question. But what happens when you don't know what question to ask? The wool is pulled over your eyes and anything gets by. That's one of the problems. The next problem is that, you see, those of us who are there to guide are also not competent. So might I ask the ICSI if your syllabuses have recently been changed to include significant upskilling of your members in the area of AI, even to add value. Now I'm asking this with a certain sense of bias in myself because I regularly attend the CMI AGM as a past global president. And we introduced digital accounting into the syllabus about 5-6 years ago. And just the last update of the syllabus, which happened in June, brought in a whole lot of stuff on AI. We are getting away from the fundamentals of debits and credits and all of that. That happens today. We don't need to train accountants in that space, but we need to train them as to how to exploit the use of AI to do the right thing and to get the right and required answers. So those are the two areas that I think are the biggest challenges in the context of governance in this whole space. And let's see where we go from here.
Very good. ICSI, point to note, please.
So adding on to what Aubrey just mentioned about sort of educating yourself with respect to AI, right? I think it's absolutely right. It's incredibly important that this starts right at the primary school level, right? And I'll give you a small example. A lot of students these days, my students who I teach, often come and tell me, why should I learn programming, right? AI writes all the code. GPT-5, which recently came out, is a specialist in writing code, right? And I tell them this, like, look, while this technology is very good and it makes you go fast, you can't run unless you learn to walk first, right? In the sense, you use large language model to generate code. When it goes wrong, how do you fix it? If you don't know, if you haven't learned to program a computer, when it makes a mistake, how do you fix it? Right? It's not going to fix its own mistake, right? It's an analogy that I like to give is this, right? My daughter, who's 6 years old now, she's learning, division, multiplication. And I said that, look, calculator can do the same calculations, but that doesn't mean that we stop teaching kids multiplication, addition, and subtraction, right? Because in the end, it's a tool. It will go wrong at some point. How do you fix it, right? You can't. So that is one about educating ourselves. So that's what I'm saying. The world we live in today is going to be very different. 5 years from now is going to be very different. We'll have to adapt ourselves to this technology, which is here now, right? The second thing is more of a risk, in the sense we are getting new technology or new versions of this technology coming out in maybe 6-month cycles, whereas regulation around these things are probably going to take years, right? EU has a new law, which is the EU AI regulatory framework. US is on the other extreme with self-regulatory stuff, like sort of fox guarding the hen house, so to speak, with the US, right? So these are different approaches, right? Probably somewhere in the middle is the right balance, but nobody has found it, and for good reason, right? But governance, whether public governance or whether corporate governance, policies will have to change faster. So there'll have to be faster cycles to keep up with the change that is upon us, right? And I'm not seeing that anywhere actually. And even in academia, in spite of being at the forefront, understanding this technology and what it means, even we are not able to keep up with the pace at which we should be changing our educational programs in the classroom, right? We are trying our best, but it's work in progress.
Yeah, I was about to add that, because the speed at which AI development is taking place is outpacing everyone, right? From academics to corporate governance people to the regulations, etc. So what do you do? I mean, let me ask you a question, because you're a data scientist, or could you have an AI program to keep track of it and keep ahead of it?
Look, this is what AI, like I said, all it does is given a question just based on it's a mirror, right? Remember, think of AI as a mirror, right? It reflects what you show it, right? So think about it like this. How does AI create something it has never seen before? Can it do that? It can't, right? So therein lies a small problem, meaning If you're expecting AI to do something that it's not been trained on, it will give you a beautiful answer. You can ask it to make chocolate sushi paratha, and it will give you a recipe, right? Now, if you use that recipe, good luck to you, right?
I'll give a live example. Thank you for bringing this topic. So given that I'm from the industry, I'm in the front of the client. So I was in front of Hong Kong State Prison. The problem at hand was...
You were not waiting to get in, were you?
Oh, definitely not. The problem at hand was, as you know, most of the prisons, there are suicides that happen. Hong Kong prison wanted to implement an AI system that could predict suicidal tendencies in the prisoners. Imagine the problem. As you said, AI is a mirror. To train, so what is an AI, right? If you show an AI model 10 different or 100,000 different varieties of dogs, so that when the next dogs walk in front, he'll say, well, that is a dog. And if I put a kitten also in that image, he will even put a kitten in image. Now, how do I train an AI model on 50,000 people committing suicide? You see, that's where the challenge is. So your question, and I think you answered it aptly there.
Yeah. I'll give you an example, and this is right here in Australia, right? There was a lawyer, and so since company secretaries would understand this quite well, and this was in Victoria, he's fighting a family dispute or something. He was supposed to submit papers with citations of similar cases and quotes from similar cases. So he used GPT to generate everything. I'm sorry, I don't know whether he used GPT. He used some large language model to generate all the case papers and submitted the case papers, right? As it turns out, the judge and the judge associated, when they vetted those cases did not exist. They were fictional cases, right? So obviously the judge cautioned him and the lawyer, and he was penalized. So he's no longer capable of being a principal lawyer now, right? So the judge also made a very interesting comment, and that's why it stuck in my head. The judge said that it took several hours for me and my associates to actually go through all the citations and all the quotes that you had mentioned in your documentation, right? So on one hand, we're talking about this productivity gain, which is real, right, in most cases. And on the other hand, here is somebody trying to, the judge and his associate spending several hours trying to fix, or trying to just figure out whether those citations were real or not. Yeah, so this is, and it's funny in a way, and I'll give you a personal example. Like last week, I was going somewhere, so I Googled if there was parking at a train station, and it said, oh yes, there is free parking at this and this street, right, near whatever train station I wanted to park my car at. So I drive there, and I spent half an hour looking where the parking lot was. It was non-existent, and then I parked my car, had a good laugh about it, and then went around looking for street parking. So on one hand, we have productivity gains. On the other hand, we have loss in productivity. And guess what? Who's paying for it? If the lawyer puts in wrong documentation and the court spends substantial amount of time fixing those errors, essentially it's the taxpayer who's bearing that bill, right? Somebody's gaining productivity, but somewhere there is loss of productivity as well, right? So these are all things. Who should be penalized? Who should be held accountable? These are all real risks right now.
So audience, you've had a very nice session, I believe. I'll just take 5 minutes more on my last question. Then we'll ask question from you if you have any clarifications or things that you can ask. And probably wake you up from your sleep after the lunch. But my last question, guys, is we've got the different governance mechanisms. You've got country regulations, you've got board regulations. So one, obviously ICSI, so the board, CSs are very close to the board, you're advising the board. So what could that element play its part in terms of advising correctly the boards? Related to the same is in terms of how do you ensure that the in-country regulations, the industry body regulations are all taken into considerations when such advice is given. Over to you. And if these were, my question is, if all these previous examples state that none of these regulations were followed, which means the fall of governance over there. Okay.
The point, I guess, is that the regulations are not uniform. I mean, this came up in one of the sessions earlier as well. Especially cross-border regulations can be very, very different. And what an organization can do in one country, they perhaps cannot do in another country. Now, in many countries, there are regulations with regard to text and data mining, right? Now, Australia, we know that cases were brought against Google and all of that because the news publishers, raised a hue and cry about their news articles being pilfered, right? Yes. Being copied, and therefore Australia has brought in regulations. However, funnily enough, I mean, I know we were talking about, the rules in Singapore with regard to anti-money laundering and all of that. In fact, Singapore has one of the most lax regulations in the context of data and text mining. And that is because they realize that large language models depend on huge troves of data to build their intelligence. And perhaps Singapore is looking at itself as being a place where AI can proliferate, right? So that has to be considered as well. So similarly, I wonder if there are global conglomerates, for example, which operate across multiple countries, and some of your members must be, in governance roles in those types of countries. How do you manage it? I think someone mentioned this yesterday, I think that gentleman there, about Roche, right? And what was required by GDPR and, how it applied to India. So you have conflicts like that. And until you have a uniform set of regulations in the context of AI, it's going to be a challenge for everyone concerned.
Dr. Aditya, you've got 2 minutes.
Look, as a bit of a practical advice, right? Whether you're doing corporate governance or public governance, use of AI is inevitable, right? Only thing that you can do now is deal with the risks, and the risks are well understood at this point. As a practical advice to everyone out there, use AI, but vet its output. Do not send anything out that is AI generated unless you have vetted it, right? Now, the question on your mind should be, if I do that, where's the productivity gain? Well, I can promise you there still will be what you could do in maybe 3 days, you can still do it in 1 day, right? But do not cut corners there. Do not cut corners with the vetting process right now, at least.
Which is the governance aspect. Vetting is the governance aspect of it.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, your time now. Exciting questions? Oh, we've got many youngsters in the room. You guys use AI like crazy.
At least use chatbot to ask a question of us. ChatGPT.
Yeah, please.
Thank you. This was a wonderful panel also. I didn't know I will have a question that relates with AI. I introduced myself before. My name is Sanskriti, and I, in addition to what I said before about myself, I also teach postgraduate media students at UNSW and UTS. My question is related to how we heard you talk about job applicants choosing to highlight certain aspects of their intersectional identity, like gender, or belonging to a minority group and how they belong there. And they face penalties for this algorithmically or AI-wise, right?
Well, it happened, and then what happened was it was realized, and then the company pulled back that whole AI program. Okay. So what happened in the POC stage, when the AI model was trained, it obviously showed a lot of productivity increase and efficiency gains, and therefore it was put into production, which is HR managers using it. But after a few weeks, it was realized, obviously the outcomes were you're only getting male resumes. And then an audit was conducted, the governance aspect of it. The audit was conducted and found out, and that's how the reason was known, that the AI model was trained on resumes which had dominated by males. So, and hence it was pretty, it was quickly drawn back. Now, imagine the amount of time, money it was spent on that AI program just went down the drains.
Okay, but as a media scholar, I can confirm that these systemic injustices that happen offline are injected into the online systems, as most of us do know, empirically, statistically as well. So from a governance perspective, how on an organizational level is it being ensured that the use of AI for recruitment and other processes does not reproduce this bias, rather fosters fairness still, keeping in mind the opacity of algorithms. So we talked about, I'm a socio-scientist, which means I don't talk about the backhand of how coding is done and things like that, but we do educate our students about algorithmic folklore, which means how we mythify algorithms and we start to use AI and social media platforms and other online platforms in a way that we think the functionality behind is. So how together are we addressing this?
No, thank you. Very good question. I mean, an apt example of governance again here, and Aubrey, and if you would want to comment on this. I have my own views, but then it's better for you.
So look, what you're suggesting, what you're saying is essentially detecting bias in algorithms, right? These biases come from the data sets on which these algorithms are trained. And there's massive opportunity for regulation to come in. Meaning, think about these models as public infrastructure, right? Meaning, before a bridge is built, there are certain approvals, certain things that the bridge should conform to. Similarly, there should be regulations around how models should be built. That's what I think would help alleviate some of the problems associated with bias.
And that's what the board governance, and that's why this topic of governance. And I believe, Aubrey, you already mentioned about this, but please go ahead.
Yeah, but I came across a very interesting way an organization had got over this. I was at the Google Summit sometime last year, I think, and there were a lot of these sponsor organizations, and there was one mob from the UK who were using Google Gemini to do their job vetting and stuff like that. Now, it put the control in the hands of the applicant. So the applicant could choose if whether his or her application was going to be vetted by a preferred gender, or even when the interview was conducted not by a human, but a chatbot. And it gave the option to the interviewee to select what type of interviewer he or she would prefer. So you're putting the onus on the other side to make that decision. So that I thought was a smart way of getting over this one-sided bias, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. That's insightful. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I actually have a second question.
Please
Can
shoot.
I wanted to talk about how we have started to very newly educate our incoming postgraduate students about technologically deterministic attitudes, which means technology does this to us and this is how we should be handling it because it has these repercussions. Now, the new scholars are trying to dismiss this and foster human and technological cohesion. When you talk about risks and our awareness of the same, we're again distancing ourselves from technology, which is like an effort that's going to go in vain, considering how close we are and how immersed we are technologically. So what do you have to say about that, and how can that be turned around?
Okay, so I'll give you a practical example, and I take this from a job where I come. See, most of, as I said, it starts in the universities. What you get in the market is coming from the big tech firms. Like Lenovo is one of the largest infrastructure providers in the world. What we've done, and with NVIDIA, when we develop our AI models, we ensure that there is a governance person, there is a person, industry relevant person, as well as a person who comes from a governance mechanism to supervise these models. And I'm sure if we are doing it, everybody else is also doing it. You've always, whether it is OpenAI, whether it is when the models are being developed by NVIDIA, Dell, HP, everybody now has, and they're conscious of all this. I mean, if we are talking, obviously they are talking of, they have embedded these people, they're professionals who kind of ensure that ethical AI is being developed. I mean, I myself am a champion of ethical AI when I talk this about. So we kind of do it at the production level that way. But gentlemen, if you could, from your perspective.
Look, ethical AI is responsible AI, ethical AI are hot topics, right? And it will be for all the risks that we've already sort of covered. Yep.
Yeah, nothing
Thank
more
you.
to add on that.
Thank you. Thank
There's
you.
a question here.
Yeah,
Yes,
sure,
please.
there's a question.
Shall I throw this to you as a cricket ball? Yeah, there's a question here. Just kidding.
Hi, my name is Manish Kia. Less of a question, more a comment. We're talking about the biases and hallucinations and all that. And we are also aware that this is just the very first line written in the whatever the AI is coming, the world of AI. We've just started. And hopefully this all will be corrected or it will be resolved at a transactional level, but maybe there may be even deeper biases. So that's something different. So in that, and we are very rapidly giving up our thinking sovereignty, if I may put it that way, to ChatGPT. We are all very happy to get some output. I read that case as well, Dr. Aditya, which he quoted, which happened, I think, a couple of days back. Judge was very furious. I think that, how the lawyer did that. But that's where we are heading to. And one example that I can think of is the world is eagerly awaiting for the first single-person unicorn as well, that one person can run the whole company. The professions are very quickly being autobotized, if I may put it that way. So within this context, I definitely have a slightly different view in terms of where we are heading and the fate of humanity linked to all these things. But the risk and the governance, the countries are trying to understand at this moment, forget about regulating. And while we are talking about ethical AI, if that was the case, Sam Altman at this stage wouldn't say that I would put guardrails for children. He should have done it on day one before releasing that out in the open. So in that context, the risk and governance are going to be quite sacrificed, I believe, or we will have a really difficult scenario. Any thoughts or comments? Maybe it's a contra situation for you.
No, thank you so much for saying that. And you're right. Look, anything in its early infancy when it is there are these teething issues. But I'm glad everything is being talked about, and there are professionals who are coming up front and it all boils down to personally saying that it has to be done in a proper way. Otherwise, now or our future generations will suffer. I mean, first of all, I'd also like to thank ICSI for bringing this topic in this forum. If you look at from generally, it's accounting world, but bringing technology and governance of technology in an international forum is kind of making the world cognizant that we are also, they are governing bodies. So that means they are also realizing this. And that the CSS, who are advisors to the board, are cognizant of what's happening in the technology world, how it impacts the business downstream, both to the business and to the larger population, and take the relevant steps to make that happen. Conscious of that, we are just on time. I'll say, if you want to say any closing remarks to this, to the panel.
Could I just...
yeah, please.
This thing called ethical AI, is it an oxymoron?
Not quite. No, not quite. Not at all, in fact. Ethical AI simply means that you invest enough time, effort, money on the data that you're going to use to train a model, right? Because like I said, these are reflections of ourselves. A model trained with biased data will learn those biases, right? How do you stop these biases from getting into the models? Practices around that is ethical AI, right? And unfortunately, and like the gentleman just pointed out, it is a lot of companies have paid simply lip service to it at this point, right? But it is gaining traction now, and it will.
Thank you.
In fact, if you look at the job application scenario, initially, before there was even data on how this happened, the models looked at how real people were selected, essentially by white males for those jobs. And it picked up those results and learned from it.
30 seconds.
Yeah. So that's how it happened. So it was people themselves
I'm under
reading it
pressure.
that way. Yeah.
No, I'll just answer that question. And if ethical AI was an oxymoron, ethical teenagers will also be an oxymoron.
Sorry, just one. So the point also was that I was trying to make the people who are making the technologies are really disconnected with what the rest of the human population, what kind of things should be given to. Facebook is a good example. It was supposed to be a friendly social gathering place. It has acquired a different life. And Mr. Zuckerberg was too happy to give up the misinformation, whatever, that segment, who used to check that after Mr. Trump's regulations, flexibility, So the point was that, we are handing over a lot of things to the technology. Some people are really excited about it. Rest of the people have no clue what's really this country for them.
No, thank you so much. Very interesting comments, and thank you, audience, for being there with us, listening to this. I would like to take one thing, and I see some solemn face after the lunch. My dad, I'm originally from Lucknow. My dad used to say whenever someone comes to Lucknow was, मुस्कुराइए जनाब आप लखनऊ में हैं. मैं आपसे ये कहता हूँ, people who've come all the way from India, मुस्कुराइए जनाब आप सिडनी में हैं. You're in one of the world's most beautiful cities. So enjoy your time here. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, my panelists.
Thank you so much, dear guest, for such an awesome session. Can I please request Priyanka Padley to give the memento to the esteemed guests? Can I please request Nirupma to come on the stage as please? That's okay. Okay, we'll go. Okay.
Just a group photograph and then. Yeah, group photograph.